If the idea of taking money makes you uneasy, owing people, reporting to them, or dealing with headaches that come with it, you're not wrong to be cautious. This isn't about convincing you to raise money. It's about helping you understand when money helps, when it hurts, and how to avoid deals you'll spend years unwinding. And with that, I cannot think of a better person to be able to have this conversation with because one, this isn't my expertise. And two, I know that he not only has this conversation, he tells people when it's the right time and when it's not the right time, or what would be the best way to be able to go about it. So, Mr. Jeffrey Kent, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be something that I think a lot of people, especially right now, are looking at, considering, or are already on that path. And this will help them figure out if they're going about it the right way. So I want to thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on and giving me the opportunity to share with your audience.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so let's start here because this matters for a lot of people who are raising money and people who are deliberately avoiding it.
Mm.
Uh, why is funding not about growth decisions first, but more of a risk decision?
Yeah, so let me address the first part of the question. Funding is not a one-time scenario, right? As your entity grows, you're going to need funding more than once.
Mhm.
So, you may need funding at startup. You will probably need funding once you get some traction in the marketplace. You may want to take your company public. There are lots of things that you could do with your company as it scales. All of these require funding, right? So funding is never a one-time event. It's always going to be a multiple event, and everyone requires a different decision criteria, right?
Mm.
So, in terms of the risk and why it's more of a risk versus growth issue, is that the risk in funding is that in order to get funding, the easiest way to explain this is the easiest way to get funding is to understand the deal you have and to
Mm.
match the deal you have to someone predisposed to do the type of deal you have, right? So,
Yes.
where you run into a risk is and where a lot of entrepreneurs incur a lot of risk is that they undertake the funding process not
Mm.
understanding how funding works. And so they waste a
Yes.
ton of time talking to people who are never going to do the deal they have, right? And
Yes.
and and what happens, and this is where the risk comes in, we can't get back time. It's the most precious resource we have on earth. And if you waste a lot of time when in scaling a business, you don't have a ton of time. You have to make decisions really quickly because things happen dynamically. And if you
Mhm.
waste a lot of time, talking to the wrong people, pitching the wrong things, and ultimately you don't raise capital, well, you may not be able to recover from the time you've lost, right?
True.
You may do so much damage to your business that you can't recover. And so it's not a mystery that when you see studies that say, hey, 80% of all small businesses fail within 10 years. And then when
Mhm.
they drill down and talk to the entrepreneurs who failed and say, what do you attribute your failure to? At least 50% of the reasons why have something to do with raising capital or finance.
Mm.
Right. And so that's the huge risk. It's like, you're already against behind the eight ball as it is trying to
Mhm.
start a success, a small business and make it successful. It's much more likely that you're going to fail than succeed, at least on the first time. And you're going to need capital at some point. And again, if you know, 50% of the reason why people fail is because of lack of access to capital. If you waste a lot of time doing things that ultimately could be corrected if you understood how fundraising works. You avoid the potential of losing your business and having to start all over again. And when you do that, you're more than likely going to have to do it with a completely brand new venture. You're it's rare
Yeah.
that you're going to be able to you know uh, um, resurrect something that's gone south. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. It's something where it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. I was saying damage control is trying to undo damage that's already been done.
yeah,
And I don't know that you can do that, especially when it's to your reputation.
yeah,
And once someone has a sour taste, they normally don't let that go. You can try to do make goods, you can do different things, but once there's a perception,
Right.
then some cases you're going to end up throwing more money into trying to change that perception than just doing complete rebrand. So
Right. Right.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I would say growth versus risk for me is those are just different stages.
Yeah.
Like there are some people that may be early stage
Mm.
that are thinking about the risk, and there are a lot of risks that come along with looking into funding, but
Right.
you highlighted a risk that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and I love that you unpack that is there's the risk of not understanding what that process looks like and who
Yeah.
to have that conversation with.
Right.
Because if it is something that's time sensitive, then you
Yeah.
having the conversation with the wrong people
Right.
is only prolonging the sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And then as urgency creeps in, then so does the need to compromise and you lose some of the leverage that you may have going into it. So
Right.
I love that you spoke to that because a lot of people think about the risk on the back end of, well, if I get funding, then, I have to pay it back and what's the terms and this, that, and the other. But there's also the risk of not knowing who you need to be able to talk to, how long the process may actually be, and then it's understanding things like that, because when you have a better understanding of that, then it helps you to start to figure out who you need to be having a conversation with. We both joked about having to block people
Yeah.
because they called us about loans and funding. And it's one of those things of how can you offer me something when you have no idea what my circumstances are, what my
Right.
situation is?
Yeah.
It just automatically lets me know that it's so impersonal
Right.
that that's the type of person that I do need to avoid,
Yeah.
because if it's impersonal now, it's going to be impersonal on the back end and you
Yeah.
don't care about what my situation is.
Yeah.
You're giving me money and you're going to have expectations on the back end that probably don't align with what mines are. So
Right.
I think that's a great, great point.